Andrew Medhurst, tell us about your story. Why did you give up the big bucks for this?
Well, thank you for having me. And it's slightly, well, it's very embarrassing, actually, because clearly I come from a position of privilege. I could give up my job for climate change, which is exactly what I did in early 2019.
Hmm.
I'd spent most of 2018, if you remember the heat of that summer
Yeah.
in 2018, I'd remember coming out of work on the South Bank at, just gone 6 o'clock in the evening. And it was just oppressive heat. And I'm old enough to remember, the last really intense summer in the UK in 1976, I think it was.
Hmm.
That was pretty much exclusive to the UK. But 2018, the whole world was on fire. In fact, I remember a headline that summer in The Sun,
Hmm.
and it was literally "The world is on fire." And I was reading all this stuff, and I just thought, I cannot, in all consciousness, continue to work for a pension company, which I was at the time,
Hmm.
and teach kids of my kids' age. I've got two kids, 21,
Mm.
26. Encourage them to save for the next 20 or 30 years when I believe that is
Mm.
nothing short of a Ponzi scheme. And so I resigned my job um, because of the emergence of this organization called Extinction Rebellion. And I volunteered for them for the best part of 2 years.
Now, what I was trying to get at with Claire, and I have to say, she did a pretty good job, but this matters to a lot of people out there. Why should people that have got a lot of other things to be worried about be concerned at the top of their agenda in life about the climate crisis? Help us out with that. Be an advocate for it.
Okay, well, the system is broken, all right? The system, as it currently operates, where companies maximize the profits for their shareholders, irrespective of the damage that they're doing to the planet and to other people who may or may not be their customers, it's broken because, as the science is telling us, as pretty much all of the world's 180 odd countries around the world have signed up and agree,
Hmm.
effectively life on Earth is being damaged. And it's being damaged not just for our children and our future grandchildren, if we're lucky enough to have them, it's being damaged for people on the planet now. It's definitely being damaged for people in the global south.
Hmm.
And as we've seen with some of these freak weather events over the last few months, it's impacting people not dissimilar to ourselves in Germany, in Canada, in the Western United States,
Hmm.
in Belgium. These are really scary. And the scary thing about it is it's happening much more quickly than the scientists were predicting. So
Hmm.
effectively, we can't ignore this situation because business as usual will ultimately crash and burn. And so ultimately, it's about doing something now to
Hmm.
minimize the harm and somehow change the systems in which we operate so that they work for everybody, not just the very rich people on our
Right.
planet who seem to do best out of it.
Right. Well, that's the problem that I have, and Andrew Medhurst, I'm not going to be putting any other side to you about the climate change crisis. There'll be plenty of people on Twitter out there that can provide you with some sort of scientific inverted commas narrative. My concern, as somebody who is concerned as you are about the climate crisis, is that you'd agree with me that globally and in our own country, it's likely to impact, of course, the poorest and least privileged, just as all catastrophe tends to do, wars and climate, etc. My problem, as I was getting at with Claire Farrell from Extinction Rebellion, is how that message is delivered. It's not just a PR message, it's who is the messenger. And I want to ask you three questions about that, one after the other. The first one is, there is an image problem here, is that, yes, I hear from you, you've made sacrifices, etc., but the number of people who champion this as the primary issue for them tend to be the ultra privileged. Listen, if you're out there and you are an activist, I know you are doing it too. But I'm talking about people, let's say, like Prince Harry and Meghan and others of that ilk, who talk and virtue signal about climate change, but are prepared to make none of the sacrifices that you and Claire Farrell and maybe other Extinction Rebellion activists are. I mean, doesn't that sort of annoy you that they get all of the focus when, and what I'm going to say is, the real activists who are prepared to make the sacrifices get none of the attention?
Absolutely. I agree 100% with you. This week, there's been a lot of noise about the fact that Gail Bradbrook, one of our co-founders, I know Gail very well, drives a diesel car. Well, Bill Gates has 4 private jets, and effectively that is offensive to me. Bill Gates would be somebody who would say, look, I get the climate emergency. I know what we have to do. There's a technological solutions that are going to solve this problem. But actually, it is the very richest people whose behaviors need to change the most.
Right.
Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I could throw a load of stats at you, Robert, but essentially, here's one stat. Okay. So I do not accept this argument that hardworking families have to bear the brunt of the cost of climate action. Can I just, I was listening to a speech the other day. It was back in June by an academic and professor called Jeffrey Sachs. He advises the United Nations. He says, we have 2,775 billionaires on this planet, and their combined worth is 9.5 trillion pounds. Okay, there's so many noughts, I can almost not work it out. I'm a mathematician.
Well, what can I do for climate crisis?
Okay, effectively, when people say that climate action is important and it's going to hit the poorest hardest, no, climate breakdown, as you rightly said, is going to hit the poorest hardest. Yeah. Climate action should benefit the hardworking families in the UK, and not just hardworking families in the UK, hardworking families all around the world.
Andrew, I'm going to stop you, if I may, because it's about getting those hardworking families on board. And, you know, it's been difficult to say, at the very least. A lot of people are struggling with unemployment. Many people can't get access to justice, SEN. You know the long list of issues and problems of the most powerless in our country and in other parts of the world. Though one of the things I wanted to focus on is very often the messaging around climate catastrophe or crisis is delivered through the message of horror, as if we've passed a tipping point and there's nothing that we can do. And I wonder whether, as part of the message of Extinction Rebellion, they're actually that keen on building a broad alliance of people beyond their own activist movement. And instead of framing the argument as we're all doomed, persuading us all the one small things that we might do, each and every one of us, to help the environment. I was, for example, listening to Angela Hartnett ages ago on Desert Island Disc talking about food waste, for example. Isn't there a way in which we could reach out to communities beyond yours that are already listening to try and persuade them to make the little changes in their life rather than to have to make massive sacrifices that the big rich people aren't prepared to make?
So I really hear you, Robert, on this, but I think it's beyond individual action now. It is about system changes that will work for everybody. That's why Extinction Rebellion has targeted the government. We're not dictating how people eat or how they travel, but admittedly, how they eat and how they travel will be part of the solution. Okay, so effectively, our demands are of government, because I can go and get a bamboo toothbrush, right? I can decide never to fly again, never to eat meat again, and never to drive a car again, and it will not make one single little bit of difference.
What's the big ask?
30 years.
And Andrew, sadly, we can't have all day. Like, what is the big ask? What's going to save us all from this catastrophe, in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, the big ask is that governments essentially start acting on their promises. I mean, the UK government has already signed up to net zero 2050, which isn't enough, but they can talk and they can sign up. But you know, let's stop throwing oil on the fire, right? No more fossil fuel financing for new infrastructure projects. That's the most easy, uncontroversial thing that we can ask our government to do if they're serious.
Andrew, I've got to go to the news, but before I do, in terms of fossil fuels, it's not necessarily my point, but you understand that, I've got to put what people are thinking out there. When they talk about fossil fuels, they're angry at Extinction Rebellion and a lot of activists for saying, why aren't you going to the largest and increasingly growing world polluter in the form of China? Or are you going to be targeting all of your activism at China along with the Western nations?
Well, back in 2019, we did protest outside the Chinese embassy. We protest outside the Brazilian embassy because of the present government and the damage that it's doing to the Amazon. Essentially, I protest against the British government because I think the British government should lead on this issue. Historically, Western European nations and the United States have got rich on fossil fuels. It's only right that they are first movers in terms of cutting fossil fuel, and China will follow. China has a 5-year plan that for the first time does not mention GDP growth and talks about climate action. So I've got every confidence China will follow if it feels that it's not being lectured at by the United States and the EU, when the EU and the United States are not prepared to make the changes that they must because of their historical emissions.